In September last year, a statue of John Chilembwe, a Malawian freedom fighter, was unveiled in London's Trafalgar Square. This is a popular meeting point of many people in London, same to city centre or Blantyre CBD back home. The unveiling of the sculpture, designed by a Malawian-born artist and Professor Samson Kambalu, means that Chilembwe's contribution against colonial rule was not in vain. In this special program, I, Joyful Paliani, earlier spoke to the artist and later the British High Commissioner to Malawi, Sophia Willits-King, to explain on the significance of the whole idea and why, among all African freedom fighters, the Chiradzulu-born fearless freedom fighters' bronze statue gigantically reigns its boldness in the King's Land. What made you think of Reverend John Chilembwe amidst all the famous people that we have in Malawi?
When I moved to Oxford to pick up a professorship at Ruskin School of Art, the first thing I did was to visit the colonial archives. You know, there's a place called Western Library, and this is where all the colonial bureaucrats dumped their documentation of their lives in the colonies. So when I went to Western Library, which is at Oxford, I was interested in trying to find out what they have on Malawi. That's when I came across this photograph of John Chilembwe. And I thought there was a message in it, but I wasn't too sure what it was. They're just two men wearing hats, standing side by side. And I wasn't too sure what was happening there. And I intended to decipher that, because the figure of John Chilembwe has always fascinated me. I like the way he translated traditional, his traditional, Malawi heritage or Chewa heritage into a modern lifestyle, if you like. There are many aspects of his mission, the province's industrial mission, that are really modern, but they also allude to his African heritage. So I kept this photograph to inspire me for my own work as an artist on the phone, and that's when the London Mayor Office got in touch that I should propose for the fourth plinth. Basically, you are invited to propose from a long list, and you have to be making a name in the art world. People have to be knowing about you, and so they invite you. So it's at the same time a compliment on your progress as an artist. And so I was happy to hear from them. So I had the photograph of the two men wearing hats of John Chilembwe and his friend John Charlie on my phone. And so when I got this email, it was immediate. Okay. It's as if this photograph chosen me to propose John Chilembwe for the fourth plinth. It was that coincidental. And I had no doubts that John Chilembwe has to be there. The fourth plinth is for your horse. Trafalgar Square is like the center of the British Empire, really.
Yes.
This is where all the generals that built the British Empire are placed. The generals that fought Napoleon at the Battle of Trafalgar are there. So it's a very important place. But however, one of the plinths on this square is empty. So they invite artists to propose for this plinth every 2 years. So my work will stay there for 2 years, and then there'll be another, I think the next artist is Mexican. And they give you that freedom, propose what do you think should go on the fourth plinth. So for me, I looked at the fourth plinth and I wanted to propose something that means something to me as Malawian and John Chilembwe fitted the bill,
Beautiful. Now, Professor, I'd like you also to take us through the experiences. I read in one of the publications that you had to be shortlisted amongst 6 artists. That is, I hope I'm right.
Yeah, at first there's a long list. That's
yes. Before you go on, I wanted to get from you what your experience was being shortlisted and yours being winning popular votes. What was your experience to get those approvals by the British government?
For me, I always think that John Chilembwe knew what was coming to him. And when you look at the photograph, it's almost he's sending a message. And, you know, a lot of John Chilembwe's messages are mysterious like that. And when I got the email, I thought, okay, that's why John Chilembwe got in touch with me. He wants me to take his message forward. And so when I was shortlisted, this was a year before Black Lives Matter took center stage and George Floyd was killed. This was a year before that. In fact, I proposed this simply because I'm a Malawian and that's how I see Trafalgar Square. For me, Trafalgar Square is John Chilembwe. You know that the guns that were used to fight, that Lord Nelson used to fight Napoleon, they were sold to Africa after the wars, Napoleonic wars. And actually they contributed to the rationing of slavery in South Africa. You know that John Chilembwe's father was a slaver and his mother a captured slave. So, and it's the chaos that was created by these arms that actually paved the way for colonialism. By the time the explorers were coming in, Africa was already in chaos because of these guns that were used to fight Napoleon and then sold to Africa. And then they established also the Cape Colonies, so all that. And so John Chilembwe is very much a product of British history. For me personally, I thought, well, Chilembwe belongs here. We know that his uprising actually failed because it was beyond tribal lines. People were still thinking along tribal lines when he stood up against colonial injustices. So for me, I've always regarded Chilembwe as a kind of modern man. So when I was shortlisted, I felt that Chilembwe just simply a rupture in time, a rupture in history, because it was around the same time that they were deciding on the shortlist that Black Lives Matter happened, and George Floyd got killed, and people were standing up for injustices, racial injustices. So that it just helped. I'm sure by the end of the, people think that I proposed this sculpture because of what was happening in the news, but actually, it's just a coincidence that history went Chilembwe's way.
Yes.
You know, so it almost looks inevitable now that he would be selected to go up there on this short list. Yeah. Which was made up of artists around the world. Yeah.
Yes. And why do you think yours won the popular vote?
I think that usually the fourth plinth people tend to make contemporary sculptures that have nothing to do with history, usually. Like before me, there was an ice cream there, and it's seen as radical. Yeah, it's seen as radical. But for me, I used to look at that place as an African thinking, what a waste of space, because there are many histories that are not told here in Britain. You know, Britain has not begun to make account of its colonial histories, especially Southern Africa. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to really use that plinth, because Trafalgar Square is a very historical place. And I thought this was an opportunity to really bring detail to what Trafalgar represents to me as an African. For me, that figure that fitted bills was Chilembwe. I'm glad that there was an appetite now after what was happening perhaps in history or in time, that the public wanted to not only celebrate an ice cream, you know, as a kind of curious thing juxtaposed against power, but they really wanted to know what these generals were up to abroad in Africa or in India or whatever. So I'm sure that people just had this appetite to revisit British history, colonial history, in detail, rather than before when they were trying perhaps to live in denial or trying to ignore it or try to forget it. Somehow history had moved in such a way that the British public suddenly began to say, okay, we have to make an account for our histories abroad. And yes, so they voted for him. It was the most popular, yes.
Okay. So talking
but it's also a nice sculpture, by the way. It's a good sculpture, by the way. I don't think the fact that timely is enough.
And before I forget, why did you name it Antwerp? Why the name Antwerp?
Yeah, I think that explains why perhaps also the sculpture was chosen, because I, after Chilembwe, decided to make a sculpture in reference to his African heritage.
Okay.
So Chilembwe means antelope, as you know.
Yes.
You're a Chichewa speaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. And I think that, his father was his mother was a Chewa, so I think he's alluding to, actually, for me, Nyao masking.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the hat he's wearing, he's not wearing it like this.
Mm-hmm.
I used to wonder why the hat looks so special, but I think he's wearing it actually like that.
Okay.
This becomes almost antlers, like Chilembwe. Like, he's literally standing there, although he's wearing a Western suit, he's alluding to his African heritage.
To his African heritage.
So,
okay.
yeah. And we know that when we allude to Nyao masking, it's speaking truth to power. We know how, even during Banda's time, Nyao was used to criticize. It was the only thing that was allowed to really stand up to Banda and allude to him of some things that were not right. And so I think Chilembwe deploys the same critical thinking from Nyao, the same performative critical thinking to criticize colonial injustice.
Okay.
Namely, let's say, the wearing of hats. Africans were not allowed to wear hats at that time.
Yes.
Many African politicians' careers began with incidents of the hat. For instance, Masako Chipembele joined politics because he was beaten up cycling past a white man wearing a hat. So when he was beaten up, he was dragged off the bicycle. When he was beaten up, he joined politics to change such injustices. So Chilembwe successfully managed to pass that. I didn't know that it was illegal. It was forbidden for Africans to wear hats before white people. I only found this when I was researching the sculpture, because I was wondering why Chilembwe's hat
was
emphasized
in that matter. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I think he was trying to tell me, you can use this to make a political statement.
To make a statement. Okay. Thank you.
Like I am doing. Pass that message. Yeah. So that's what happened. Yeah. The sculpture itself, and by the way, that antelope also alludes to like Kasiamaliro, which is a womb disguised as an antelope.
Yes.
The Chewa principal mask, Kasiamaliro, the oldest one, is actually, because we are matrilineal families. I'm a Chewa myself, from the Chewa tribe, and as Chilembwe was matrilineal, his mother's. So by alluding to the antelope, he was actually embracing his African heritage, even as he was moving forward as a modern Malawian, beyond tribal.
Now, speaking of African statues, how many are there, and probably who else is there?
I think the importance of Chilembwe going on Trafalgar Square is not, I don't know whether it's understood in Malawi fully. That's a big deal, because Trafalgar Square is the sacred place of the British Empire. And for Chilembwe to appear there is a big victory for him.
Yes, it's a big thing.
It's not Mandela who made it there. It's not Marcus Garvey. It's not Malcolm X. It's not, these people are elsewhere. Like Mandela is nearby. There are people like, figures like Gandhi and stuff like that. But Chilembwe appears right on the central place of British Empire, which is Trafalgar Square. It's where British Empire evolves, Nelson represents a triumph of the British Empire after defeat of Napoleon. Because after the defeat of Napoleon, British were able to move up into Southern Africa and establish their colonies there, starting with the Cape Colony. So for Chilembwe to have somebody who was unknown like Chilembwe, nobody knows Chilembwe, by the way. That's why I proposed it. Anybody. In fact, I said in my proposal that nobody knows Chilembwe, although he inspired a lot of African political leaders, like African American, such as Marcus Garvey and Du Bois, is not known. So it's like the head cornerstone, the cornerstone that was ignored suddenly becomes important. The stone that is ignored becomes a head cornerstone. And that's what Chilembwe has done. I think using his revolution for me was very conceptual. I think he knew he wasn't going to win, but nevertheless, he chose a path of self-sacrifice to stand up for an injustice. And I think he deserves this honor, you know.
Mm.
Everybody, a lot of people know him in the West now after the Falkland,
Yes.
you know.
Okay. And
So I think that's an achievement that's not perhaps taken for granted in Malawi, but for a Black person who resisted colonial rule in an uprising still is honored on a place like Trafalgar Square is that's a big deal. It shows that even the British acknowledge some merit in his cause. You know what I mean? Because otherwise he's kind of accused of leading a violent revolution. But people see what he was trying to do as a Baptist preacher, bring equality. Even there was no hope for it at the time, he still tried. I think we can all learn from that. It's still important, even when the odds are against you, it's still important to stand up for what's right. Yeah.
So I think you've already touched on what I wanted to ask you next, at what part of space does Reverend Chilembwe occupy in Malawi's story? So I think most of it you've already touched that. I was also going to
I can tell you something though.
Okay.
I can tell you the thing that really interested me about Chilembwe, apart from the politics, is that he's a figure of Malawian modernity.
Okay.
You know, in other ways, that's what really Chilembwe brings, because he's the first one to stand up against colonial injustices beyond tribal lines. There were people protesting colonialism at the time. The Ngonis did, the Lays did, the Yaos were fighting against the British occupation. But Chilembwe was the first to say we should forget about, we should move forward as a people. That's very radical. And that inspired me as an artist. Also, the way he uses his African heritage to articulate issues. More I learned from him, the way he uses performance to tackle issues that affect him. I think we can all learn from that. In Malawi, we still have the traditions in the villages that we are grappling with as we move forward into modern times. And I think Chilembwe shows how you can use, let's say, things like Nyao to make a political communication through photography, through performance, because his attitude in the photographs really alludes to those subversive, transgressive attitudes of things like Gule Wankulu, you know? And being a chair myself, I can learn plenty from that. Anyway, for me, Chilembwe is a figure of modernity. Malawian modernity. There's very specific Malawian modernity that has created people like Banda, Clement Kadali, and Malawi. Like, for instance, Clement Kadali started the political movements for Black people in South Africa. Malawi has always been a place of politics because of its tradition. We export politicians who stand up for what's right when it's necessary. And there are figures of like Chilembwe, but they also Clement Kadali, there's Banda, they're all figures, even Kaunda's parents coming from Malawi. Malawi seems to be exporting all these people who are prepared to stand up for what's right through politics. And for me, I think that maybe it's the traditional criticism that we have through traditions such as Nyao, for instance, which is the way people spoke truth to power, you know?
No, thank you so much, Professor, for sparing your time to share your success with us, so that also on this day, actually, as we will be remembering Reverend John Chilembwe, others should also hear about you, your work, and your success as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Good to meet you. I'm Sophia.
Pleased to meet you too. I'm joyful. So, Commissioner, we would like to know what it takes to have a statue at the Trafalgar Square.
Well, I think it takes a number of things. I think it takes excellent artistry, which clearly you see in the statue Antelope. But it also takes something which challenges the people of the United Kingdom, which teaches them something, which makes them ask questions about themselves and about their history. And so in a way, it's a gift, but it's also an explosion. It's also a challenge. So it's a very exciting thing. So it has to be deep and it has to be, really important to merit a place in Trafalgar Square on that fourth plinth.
And having said that, what does this mean to the relations of Malawi and Britain having Rev John Chilembwe Statue at the Trafalgar Square?
Well, I think having a statue of Reverend John Chilembwe there does a couple of things. I think it challenges the British population to think about our history, to think about the history of colonialism, the oppression during the colonial period. But it also challenges us to think about Malawi and our relationship with contemporary Africa, to understand how we can strengthen those relationships and ensure that the future is one of mutual respect, mutual prosperity, and really that it's exciting and positive for all sides.
And how do the British understand Reverend John Chilembwe?
Well, I'll be honest, I think they don't know enough about him. And that's the important thing of a statue in Trafalgar Square. It makes sure that we understand our history, that we don't forget things that should never be forgotten, that we don't forget our relationship with Malawi, which is stronger today than it's ever been, but also that we celebrate the diversity of our country, because I think for me this is a story of at least two important Malawians.
Yes.
Both Reverend John Chilembwe, but also the artist, the professor who's produced this, who is now living in the UK, contributing to one of our universities, and really enriching British life. So we have these two men making sure that the UK, and I hope Malawi, is stronger and better than ever, and more integrated, more diverse, more respectful of different ways of doing things.
And you believe that having the statue there will teach or help somebody in Britain to learn the history of John Chilembwe?
I think absolutely. I think, sometimes with these statues on the fourth plinth, people are surprised when there's controversy. They're surprised when it brings up racist attitudes. But actually that's the point. The point is to make sure that there is this conversation in public, and that as a result of it people learn and they're challenged. Not just the people who understand history, not just the people who believe in a future of anti-racism, of inclusion, but the people who don't, who realise, that they come to realise what has happened in history and why it has been so damaging, not only for the countries who have experienced colonialism, who experienced racism, but also the countries who have been complicit and responsible for that overseas. So I think it's really exciting because it stimulates that conversation.
Great. And in your own words, how important is it for this generation to respect or have relevance for our freedom fighters?
I think it's very important to understand, because I think the story of Reverend Chilembwe is of a man who, at a time when other people weren't talking about issues, raised his voice, ultimately raised his hand to take action ahead of others. And I think that for this generation, whether it is in the UK, but also here in Malawi, the need to understand that you have to speak up, that you have to fight for what you believe in, that you have to go ahead of others. I would never condone violence, but you have to think about the tools that you have available to affect change that is meaningful for you, meaningful for your community, and meaningful for the world. So I think this is the message of a brave man who goes ahead of his time and really changes the world. The other thing when I think about the fourth plinth is the strength it gives our country, the fact that we have a place where we challenge ourselves. And I think this is something that all countries, including Malawi, could really benefit from. Where in Malawi is that place that you put a really powerful piece of art which challenges Malawi to think about what is happening in the country today, the continuing injustices, and how, this country can strengthen itself and become better in the future. So, I hope it also inspires the young people of this country to look at ways in which they can think about their future.
Well, thank you so much for being with me in this interview.
It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Well, indeed, of course, it is important for the young generation as well as the old to learn about the people who fought, who selflessly rather fought for the freedom of our country and indeed the freedom that we enjoy today. You've been with me, Joyful Baliani. Till next time, it's goodbye.